Over the last few days, we've talked a lot about the Greg Biffle accident, and it was heavy news for all of us. Now, it is time for us to slow down and let the facts come in their own time. The work of the NTSB takes time, and filling in the gaps early doesn't help anyone, especially not the people we're trying to learn for. So today, I want to change gears. With Christmas and New Year approaching, this feels like the right time for a broader conversation, one that isn't about a single event, but about habits in home-built flying that are worth rethinking before the next season. If you fly home-builts, this video is for you. And if you care about someone who does, it might be worth sharing. This is William. Welcome to Black Box Analyst. And here are the 6 home-built habits worth leaving behind this year. First up, one of the most persistent assumptions pilots carry into the experimental world is that total time transfers cleanly. It's understandable. Hours do matter. Experience does matter. Judgment matters. But accident data keeps pointing to the same uncomfortable truth. Experience is highly contextual. Time in one airplane does not automatically prepare you for the specific handling, energy management, and edge behavior of another, especially when that airplane was designed outside the certification box. This is exactly why the FAA emphasizes transition training in Advisory Circular 9109A. Not because experimental pilots are unskilled, but because unfamiliar airplanes expose gaps that raw flight time can't fill. The airplane doesn't respond to resumes. It responds to inputs and to expectations. When the NTSB reviews home-built accidents, a familiar profile shows up again and again. Pilots with respectable total time, but limited time in type. The issue is rarely recklessness. More often, it's misplaced familiarity. The airplane doesn't behave the way the pilot subconsciously expects it to. 2 quiet traps drive this. The first is assumed skill transfer, believing that habits formed in certified trainers or even other experimentals will apply without friction. The second is comfort. Once an aircraft stops feeling foreign, we stop interrogating it. We fly it the way we think it flies. And most of the time, that works. Until the airplane asks a question you haven't practiced answering. Experimental aircraft often offer less warning, tighter margins, and sharper transitions at the edge of the envelope. That's not a flaw, it's a design reality. And no amount of total time closes that gap by itself. This habit isn't about dialing confidence down. It's about refusing to let confidence replace curiosity. Transition training exists for a reason, and curiosity remains one of the most reliable safety tools we have. Number 2, the urge to turn back to the runway after an engine failure on takeoff. This is one of the most human reactions in aviation. The runway is familiar, it's visually reassuring, and in the first few seconds after power loss, it feels like a solution almost automatically. But this isn't a skill problem. It's a decision trap. Unless a pilot has specifically trained for it, tested it, and defined a personal minimum altitude, attempting a turnback shortly after takeoff sharply increases risk. Not because pilots don't know better, but because physics compresses time and margin faster than instinct can keep up. The mechanics are well understood. Bank angle raises stall speed. Energy decays quickly in the climb. And in many home-built aircraft, higher wing loading and brisk control response mean there's very little buffer available to complete the maneuver cleanly. Accident sequences follow a familiar arc: power loss, tightening turn, increasing bank, decaying airspeed, and an accelerated stall with no altitude left to trade. So why does it keep happening? Because under stress, the brain reaches for what's familiar. The runway behind you feels like control even when it isn't. That's why this habit has only 2 stable outcomes. Either you've trained for the maneuver, tested it, and committed to a hard altitude gate, or the option doesn't exist. There is very little safe middle ground. Instinct pulls toward what looks safe. Physics doesn't negotiate. One of the most subtle and most dangerous habits in home-built flying is assuming that stall margin is a settled problem once you're established in the traffic pattern. We tend to think of stall speed as a fixed number, something learned early, memorized, and managed by flying familiar speeds. But in real flight, especially close to the ground, stall speed is not static. It responds instantly to what the airplane is being asked to do. And in the pattern, what the airplane is being asked to do is constantly changing. A base to final turn tightens slightly, bank angle increases, load factor goes up. The wing now needs more lift, which means more airspeed. Add weight, a forward or aft CG shift, or even minor surface contamination, and that margin shrinks again, often quietly. Nothing about the airplane has failed. What changed is the demand. This is where attention becomes the real limiting factor. The traffic pattern compresses workload, radio calls, spacing, wind correction, traffic awareness, visual cues, all of it competes for cognitive bandwidth. And when something doesn't line up perfectly, the instinctive response is often to tighten the turn or pull just a little harder. That's where margins disappear. Industry safety data shows that many fatal home-built accidents occur during approach or maneuvering flight. Not because the pilot intended to stall the airplane, but because airspeed bled off while bank angle and angle of attack quietly increased together. In many experimental designs, the warning comes late or not at all. The airplane may feel stable right up until the moment it isn't. This is why disciplined airspeed management in the pattern matters, not as a rigid target, but as a buffer, a margin that absorbs distraction, gusts, spacing errors, or momentary indecision without pushing the wing past its limit. In the pattern, stall speed isn't a number you fly to. It's a boundary you stay well away from, especially when attention is being pulled in every direction. Loss of control near the ground is rarely about ignorance. It's about assuming the margin is still there after it's already been spent. One of the quieter assumptions in home-built flying is that a clean run-up predicts reliable flight performance. A smooth start, stable idle, and normal indications on the ground are reassuring, and they matter. But ground operation and flight operation stress an engine in very different ways, especially during initial climb. Accident data consistently shows power plant related issues as a leading contributor in experimental aircraft events, not because builders ignore testing, but because many failures only appear when the engine is asked to deliver sustained high power at low airspeed and high pitch. On the ground, airflow is predictable and loads are modest. In climb, temperatures rise rapidly, cooling margins tighten, and any weakness in baffling, cowl design, fuel delivery, or ignition stability shows up at the worst possible time when altitude and options are limited. This is particularly relevant for engines adapted from non-aviation origins. Many perform exceptionally well when properly engineered, but they were not designed for continuous high-power operation in thin air with cooling that depends entirely on forward motion. The habit worth leaving behind is assuming that ground behavior equals airborne reliability. Ground testing is necessary, but it is not sufficient. A smooth run-up does not guarantee a smooth climb. Modifying fuel or ignition systems which tolerate very little ambiguity. In the home-built world, modification is part of the culture. Builders reroute lines, swap components, improve access, or update systems based on experience and advice from others. Most of the time, those changes are well-intentioned, and many work perfectly, until they don't. The challenge is that fuel and ignition systems often fail in ways that are highly dependent on attitude, temperature, and airflow. Vapor lock, unporting, air ingestion, or electrical dropouts may never appear during a ground run. They show up when the airplane is climbing, banking, or accelerating, conditions that are difficult to reproduce on the ground. That's why the FAA's flight testing guidance exists in the first place. Advisory Circular 9089C lays out a structured approach to Phase 1 testing, focused on expanding the flight envelope methodically so these issues show themselves at altitude, not right after liftoff. NTSB data supports this approach. Many system-related failures appear only once the aircraft is flown in realistic configurations and power settings. One or two successful flights don't necessarily prove a system is robust, they often just mean it hasn't been stressed yet. In flight testing, impulsive tweaks are like holiday shopping without a list. You might get lucky, but you'll probably pay for it later. Here comes that last one, which I believe to be the most important one, treating early flights like routine operations. The first hours of a newly built aircraft or the first flights after a change in ownership are uniquely demanding. The airplane is still revealing its true behavior, rigging issues, trim alignment, cooling performance, fuel feed characteristics. Many of these don't fully show themselves until the aircraft is flown through a wider range of conditions. Accident data shows that home-built aircraft are particularly vulnerable early in their operational life. Familiarity is still developing, and assumptions often outpace verification. This is why Phase 1 flight testing exists, not as a bureaucratic hurdle, but as a structured way to gather information safely. Long runways, light loading, clear abort points, conservative profiles, altitude as insurance. The habit to leave behind here is impatience. A first flight isn't a celebration. It's a data gathering mission, with margin as your co-pilot. The reward comes later, after the airplane has answered enough questions to earn your trust. So, when you step back and look at the big picture, a consistent message emerges from decades of home-built safety data. Most accidents aren't about structures falling off airplanes. They're about energy management, power plant understanding, and disciplined respect for the envelope. They're about habits, often subtle ones that quietly shape outcomes long before anything goes wrong. As the year comes to a close, this is a good moment to take stock, not with judgment, but with honesty. Which habits are serving you well, and which ones might be worth leaving behind before the next flying season begins? If you know someone who flies Homebuilts, consider sharing this with them. These conversations matter most when they happen early and calmly. Fly humble, fly curious, and let next year be safer than the last.